Okay, tell us your name, what are you running for, and what are your qualifications?
Sure, my name is Doug Edwards. I'm running for Buncombe County District Attorney. I spent the last over 10 years in the DA's office. I graduated from law school at North Carolina Central University School of Law and took a job here in Asheville in the Buncombe County District Attorney's office, where I worked, as I mentioned, for over 10 years. I started handling low-level district court cases, traffic offenses, low-level misdemeanors, and moved my way up through the office over the last 10 years. The last 7.5 years, I was exclusively assigned to Superior Court Division, where I handled cases ranging from low-level felonies to first-degree murder. The last year of my tenure before I resigned in December to run for DA, I was the first assistant district attorney, which also I also had responsibilities around personnel, scheduling, and case management issues. I'm the only candidate in this race that has successfully tried a first-degree murder case to conviction in front of a jury. I've been awarded the North Carolina Mothers Against Drunk Driving Statewide Prosecutor of the Year Award for my efforts combating impaired driving. I've also served on the National Mothers Against Drunk Driving Child Endangerment Panel, which was a panel of 14 subject matter experts from across the country that got together over the course of a year to make policy recommendations to help prevent child fatalities or serious injuries as a result of impaired driving.
What new programs do you envision implementing or changes made that will improve the effectiveness of the district attorney's office?
Sure, I think we have to have a real focused effort around case management. I think right now our jail population, our average daily jail population, has increased every year under the current district attorney, except for two, one of which was 2020 with the pandemic and the mass releases as a result of the pandemic and lowering the jail population in the jail. We have to make a concerted effort to move cases along, and that is something that the district attorney has to be involved in, and I'm committed to doing that. I would also like to continue on with programs, diversionary programs, drug treatment court, and potentially look at other courts like a mental health court that's unique, or that would address unique issues that are unique to Asheville and our population here that we're dealing with. I was a founding member of the Buncombe County Driving While Impaired Treatment Court, which is now referred to as Sobriety Court. But I think there are things that we can do to help make the district attorney's office and the justice system as a whole more efficient, effective, and fair.
Would you enforce the law and commit to setting bonds high enough to keep criminals in jail and off the streets? What programs and policies would you implement as district attorney to reduce crime and increase public safety in the county?
Sure. So bond or bail, there's a very specific purpose for bail. Bail is designed to help and increase public safety or protect the community, and also to ensure that offenders or the accused will appear in court. And we have to make sure that bond is being used for those purposes. If you are a persistent threat or a danger to the community, then yes, I will support a bond that is sufficient to secure your appearance in court. Programs and policies to help, I lost the last part of your question.
What programs and policies would you implement as district attorney to reduce crime and increase public safety in the county?
Sure. I think first and foremost, we have to start with repairing relationships with our local law enforcement agencies. I think Chief Zach and the current DA's relationship has been publicized to a large part. I have developed those relationships over the years with our local law enforcement agencies, including agency heads. Our relationship is built on, I believe, a level of mutual trust and respect. And I will work directly with those folks on a daily basis to encourage increasing public safety across the community. As I've been in this campaign over the last 2 months or so, I've talked to a lot of folks. When I was in the district attorney's office, I spoke to a lot of folks in the county. Issues in the county are not that different than the issues that we're looking at and we're facing in the city. However, one of the biggest things people tell me is that they're tired of their house being broken into, they're tired of their storage shed being broken into, and they're tired of their things being stolen. And those are something we really have to address and we have to prioritize.
Do you support diversion and mentor programs for first-time offenders ages 18 to 25? If so, what would you do as DA to promote such programs? I know you kind of spoke on this before.
Yeah, sure, I do support those programs. I think it's important that we do divert youthful, nonviolent or low-level offenders out of the traditional system. North Carolina recently raised the age in the juvenile system. I think it's important that we treat children as children. And we utilize the services of Division of Juvenile Justice when we're talking about how we're handling specifically low-level youthful offenders.
What is your stand on bonds, and do you believe in the no bond agenda put forth by many activists? And I know what no bond means to you is probably what is different from what this is worded as. So
Right, I think,
to us
sure,
what that means.
sure. So no bond in the legal sense means that you do not qualify for a bond to be set, and that happens, and that's applicable in cases of if you're charged with first-degree murder or what's called a capital offense. A first-degree murder is a capital offense in North Carolina. You're not eligible for bond. So in the legal sense of no bond, it applies in those cases, and there's also a limited number of situations that it can apply to around firearm offenses. If you have prior violent offenses and you pick up a new violent offense, or if you're on felony probation and you're charged with another, or if you're on probation and you're charged with another felony offense, you could qualify for no bond. I think what the question is referring to is probably more what I believe the question is referring to is whether or not I agree with the elimination of cash bond or cash bail. And my answer to that question is no. There is no alternative system right now. Again, though, we have to make sure that we are really laser focused on determining who needs to be in custody and who does not need to be in custody. As I mentioned earlier, our average daily population in the Buncombe County Jail has increased, and it has continued to increase post-pandemic. And we have to be very intentional about how we address our jail population and whether or not bond is appropriate. And then the DA does have a role in that. The DA can call that case into court. We can put it in front of a judge with the lawyer, and we can address those issues or those bonds if we feel like the person is being held on a bond that's not appropriate.
How would you manage enforcing laws surrounding homelessness?
Sure. Homelessness is not a new issue in Asheville. A lot of the crime, I think the level of crime that we're seeing around our homelessness issues is fairly new, and it's definitely kind of under a microscope right now. I will say that in 2015, the current district attorney put a policy in place that they would not prosecute a lot of the vagrancy type crimes. This started out of downtown, so you're talking about things like trespassing, loitering, panhandling, low-level offenses. And in 2015, that policy was put in place. I think what you're seeing right now is the results of a failed policy that was put in place in 2015 and a really a lack of response to the concerns of the community. I will respond to the community. I will be present. I'll be available. I will work alongside our law enforcement partners as well as our treatment providers, mental health providers, and our homelessness advocates and those who work with the homeless population on a daily basis. Those are the experts in the field. There has to be a balance, though. We have to be willing to direct or divert folks to resources. We have a lot of resources in Buncombe County that we can use. We have to be willing to do that, but at the same time, we have to put boundaries in place and we have to enforce the law so that we can restore a sense of safety and security in our community.
How will you support the APD and encourage them to enforce the law?
So Asheville Police Department, I think, has lost, it's been very publicized, also lost a lot of officers over the last year and a half or 2 years. I will support our local law enforcement officers. I have developed those relationships with those folks. They trust me. Just to give you a little bit of information, when I was in the DA's office, I took phone calls night and day from officers who needed answers to questions in the field. There was not time to wait. I always picked up the phone, I gave them an answer, I gave them advice the best I could. And that is one of the statutory duties of the district attorney, is to advise law enforcement in your jurisdiction, and I will do that.
Considering the low level of convictions in our city and the negative effects that it's had on the citizens in Asheville, how would you move forward in holding criminals accountable for their actions, therefore keeping them from repeat offending in our communities? And what do you think is the most effective way to deal with low-level drug offenders? So 2 questions. So the first one is, how would you hold them accountable for their actions, keeping them from repeat offending?
I think we need to, again, this is more of a holistic approach. We have to utilize our programs that we have in place, drug treatment courts, diversionary programs. Crime is driven in large part by poverty as well as substance use here locally. I mean, we know that. So we have to address those underlying issues that are related to crime, and a lot of that is societal issues, and that has to be handled by the community. When it gets to the district attorney's office, at that point, it's we can divert them out of the system to a diversionary program, or we can take traditional means of prosecution. But I will hold accountable those that do violate the law, and I'll be compassionate. I'll encourage my staff to divert cases when it's necessary and when it's appropriate. And when it's not appropriate to do that, we will take the traditional measures of prosecution.
Okay. And then what do you think is the most effective way to deal with low-level drug offenders?
Low-level drug offenders, I do not, so we're talking about possession of controlled substances. We're not talking about possession with intent to sell or deliver, or trafficking. So I just want to be very specific.
Yes.
That's what I'm speaking about.
Okay.
I do believe that it's important that we divert those offenders into programs that can help them overcome their addiction, and we have to do that. The Buncombe County Sheriff's Office has a program in the jail, the MAT, the Medication Assisted Treatment Program, which is really cutting edge here in North Carolina. We have to support that program. We need to support our community paramedic program here locally. I will advocate for that program, additional funding for that program. The Behavioral Health Urgent Care Center here at 365 Biltmore, which is transitioning a little bit, is no longer be the behavioral health urgent care, but we need to support those programs that support folks who are suffering from addiction in our community.
Do you stand by victims of crime and put their needs ahead of criminal needs?
I do stand with crime victims. I did it every day for 10 years, and that's why you do the job.
What would your office policies be regarding plea bargaining in drug offense cases?
I have not formulated a policy about drug offense cases. Again, I think we have to be cognizant of what type of case it is. Is it a possession case? Is it a sale case? Or is it a trafficking case? And when we're looking at the effect that these crimes have on our community, we have to focus our resources on cases where folks are possessing with intent to sell, selling, or trafficking narcotics in our community. I will work hand in hand with local, state, and federal agents and agencies. I have a history, a track record of doing that, working alongside law enforcement partners in this community, and we'll hold accountable those that violate the law, especially when you're talking about selling narcotics or trafficking high-level narcotics, fentanyl, methamphetamine, heroin. Those type of offenses will be my priority.
So there is a law called the Nuisance Abatement Law here, and there are certain places, if there are certain places in the communities that are causing nuisance, would you be willing to advocate for utilization of that nuisance abatement law?
Sure. So nuisance abatement is applicable in limited circumstances, and there are 3 folks who can request it, I believe, if I recall the statute correct, one of those being the district attorney. In order to know whether to consider it or not, you have to be involved. First and foremost, you have to know what's going on. We can't be so reactive that we're behind the 8 ball or we're late to the game on it. And I think a lot of these situations that's what it has just snowballed to a point where the crime around whatever property it is that you're talking about has just escalated to the point that now this may be your only option. It'll be something that I would consider. I think we have to be cognizant of how we're using it and in what cases we may be using it.
As district attorney, how would you handle a fatal use of force incident involving local police?
Sure, yeah, I would immediately refer that to the SBI for an independent investigation. I would let the investigation be completed. The file would be turned over to the district attorney, and I would review that file along with my executive staff, high-level lawyers in the office, and we would make a legal determination on whether the use of force was justified or not justified. Those cases are never easy, and use of force, it doesn't matter if it's fatal use of force or non-fatal use of force, they're always ugly. People don't want to see it, But it is a reality of the work that the district attorney does as well as law enforcement on a daily basis. And we have to recognize that, and we have to analyze these cases under the law and the facts and make a legal conclusion about whether it's justified or not justified. If it's justified, it'd be cleared. If it's not justified, we would look at pursuing criminal actions against law enforcement officers.
Okay, and final question, then we'll end with a final thought. Will you hold criminals to a standard of compensation for victims before they are off probation?
I believe the question is maybe referring to whether or not I would require criminal defendants to fulfill their obligations under a criminal judgment. I think it's important to understand that judges enter judgment in cases. So what that means is they put a person, in this case, a person would be put on probation, an active sentence would be suspended under the judgment, and they would be required to pay restitution to victims. I will do everything I can to ensure that that happens. A lot of times that's out of the district attorney's hands once the judgment has been entered against a defendant. If somebody does not meet all their obligations, but otherwise they're eligible to come off of probation, many times the outstanding monies that are owed is turned into a civil judgment against the defendant. So hopefully they could recoup that restitution maybe through other means.
Okay, and your final thoughts, anything you want the people of Asheville to know?
I'll just say that I am dedicated to this community. I am invested in this community. I love Buncombe County. I have 3 children. My wife is a business owner here locally. We are invested in this community. I want to see that everybody here lives in a safe and healthy neighborhood. And that's ultimately what the responsibility of the DA is to provide public safety in a fair manner across the board. And I am the most qualified, I'm the most experienced candidate in this race. I have tried more cases to a jury than any other candidate. Like I said earlier, I'm the only candidate that has tried a first-degree murder case successfully and obtained a guilty verdict here in Buncombe County in front of a jury. I think it is absolutely imperative that we elect a district attorney that has the experience, the knowledge, and the skill to represent this community and really promote a safe and fair judicial system and community for everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.